Hello and welcome. Welcome to the online version of Rocky Mountain Sewing and Vacuums, June 2022. So fun. I have done So Fun in April, in October, November, I think in February one year. And I really think that probably June might be my favorite month to do So Fun after doing it this time for several reasons. Number one, I don't have to worry about the weather. Although we did have snow on June 1st, but hopefully by the middle of June, I'm not worried about traveling in the weather when I go to the stores. But also, June affords us an opportunity to do a lot of different projects. We have July 4th coming up, and so certainly there's some fun patriotic projects to do. And then, of course, the fall holidays with Halloween and Christmas coming along much faster than any of us want it to. I was happy to be able to do some of those projects as well. So let's start off today with some of the July 4th projects that I made. The first of which is these Patriotic coasters from Claudia's Designs. There are 8 coasters in all, and if you've seen some of the previous So Funs, one year I made some Thanksgiving coasters, and I had tried some different materials. I tried some vinyl, I tried some leatherette kind of stuff, and I finally tried some cork, and I found that I really liked the coasters made out of cork. And so this time we got in some red and white and blue cork. And because of the designs are not filled in very much, they're mostly kind of almost like cross stitch, you need something light in the background. So we got some whitish cork for that. And then being, something for the 4th of July, we brought in some red and blue cork that I wanted to use for the backs of the coasters. These are all done in the hoop. They're very quick to make because they're not, an intense embroidered design. The longest thing that it takes to make is the border around the cork, and she does a really smart thing when she creates the cork, the stitching for the border of the cork, in that she goes over it like 5 times, getting wider and wider each time. So you have a really good base for all those stitches once you wash away the wash-away stabilizer that you've used to hoop to create the coasters. So this is called In the Hoop Patriotic Coasters by Claudia's Creations. And again, there's 8 of these. I made them with cork. You certainly could use fabric, and you could use some different materials, maybe some of the sparkle vinyls and stuff that are available now from OESD. Any number of things would be really pretty in these coasters. I saw this backyard beverage caddy by Sally Tomato. And since it's June, I was thinking picnics, and then I thought, I could make this thing in patriotic fabric and be something for the table for the 4th of July. So this is the backyard caddy. I just stuck a couple little milk bottle in here to kind of give you an idea of what you could put in here. You certainly could put in ketchup bottles and different types of bottles. You could use this as a sewing caddy and put in sewing material, sewing tools. You could use it for all sorts of things. It is set up with partitions that you sew in to the sides with little flanges, and then the handle and the bottom are made of cork to give it some stability with some feet on it to keep from getting dirty and set up on the table just right. And then the binding around the edge. It's very quick to make. Took a little less than a day to put this all together. You use Peltex inside in order to give it the stiffness that it needs to stand up. And the directions are excellent in showing you how to position the Peltex so that when you fold it here and along the bottom, that you don't have that Peltex in the seam. So it's very easy to do. You do need rivets in order to kind of bring it all in together, and those were probably the most difficult part of the of the caddy at all to do, was just putting the rivets on there because they're a little bit thick right there. But we got it done, and this is the backyard caddy by Sally Tomato. So in keeping with our 4th of July theme, I found this cute table runner by Fabric Confetti that's an embroidery design that's done in the hoop. All of the quilting and the border are done, the designs are on the disc so that you can do it in the hoop. And so this is called God Bless America banner. And this was very cute to make. It does take several hoopings, and you have to have at least an 8 by 12 hoop in order to make this. So you can start off, and her directions are excellent in showing you how to piece there's 3 hoopings total for the center, and then the 2 hoopings for each side, and the sides, and 1 hooping for the top and bottom. So it takes a little while to get it all hooped up and sewn out, but her directions are superb in showing you how to position everything to make sure everything is straight and make sure everything lines up correctly. I also thought, I made this little USA thing on my laser cutter, but when I was putting the banner together, I had this kit from this company, from this lady called Susan Cleveland. It's called Piping Hot Binding. And in it, she shows you how to add binding to the edges, in between the binding of the quilt and the quilt itself, a little pop of color. And it's a real small, thin binding. And so the kit has the tool to cut the binding, and some very good instructions on how to set up and how to do all of this, as well as a little bit of the string that you need to create this real thin binding. I found a piping foot for my FOF that's for narrow piping that was indispensable in trying to get the piping all straight. And what the tool does, it's a acrylic board that has grooves in it where your piping sits, and then the edge is either a 1/4 inch away from that or a 1/2 inch. You can decide which way, how wide you want the flange on your binding to be. And then you just run your rotary cutter around there and get perfect flange on your binding, so that when you put it in the seam, it's exactly the right size, and the binding will show evenly all the way around. So this is God Bless America, and with piping hot binding. So I don't know if any of you have summer travel plans, but if you do, you always need something to carry stuff in. And I saw this pattern called the Fico tote, and it's a quite large tote, and I thought that was really cute. And my intent initially was to make it out of the denim, sort of like what I saw here. But in my stash, I had this llama fabric, and I just couldn't resist trying to use it. So, and the embroidery designs, when I first got my embroidery machine many years ago, man, you embroidered anything that wasn't sitting still, and if you're from the South like I am, everything had to have a monogram associated with it. But I kind of gotten away from that and gotten into more quilting, as you can probably see. But I kind of got back to some of my embroidery, I won't say roots because I've been a sewist for a long time before embroidery, but just that fun of adding embroidery to things, and use this Como Se Llama Designs from Anita Good Design. It's an older design. It went perfectly with the llamas on this bag. The pattern calls for a small pocket in addition to the big pocket on the front. And my initial intent was to do that, and I even embroidered a small pocket with a little llama's head on it. But I found that once I put it on there, it just took up too much space and kind of took away from the cute llama fabric that makes the bag. So I ended up putting the pocket on the inside. So this is that little pocket that's not supposed to be there, but that's where I put it. But the pattern does have you put slip pockets on the inside. And you'll notice on the top of the slip pockets on the inside, as well as this pocket over here, I use that real small binding from the Piping Hot Binding tool to add that little pop of color. This has an inset zipper, and I use that multicolored zipper that I had used on some cosmetic bags last November that came perfectly with this tote. And again, the pockets are slip pockets on the inside. And then finally there's a zipper pocket on this side that's big enough, this pocket's big enough for you to be able to put a laptop or a tablet or something like that in there and carry it. And it's a well padded bag. Use Soft and Stable to pad it out. So this is the Fico tote, and it is, I think came out really cute with those llamas. I think it's becoming my favorite bag. And it's a nice size that not only if you wanted to carry a laptop or electronics, you certainly could pack it full of stuff to carry on your next trip for the summer. Along with the, since I had all this llama fabric, I had this kit that was zippered cosmetic bags that were Quilt-as-you-go from June Taylor. So you get a piece of batting that has the printed cosmetic bag on there, and then you just do a folded fabric for the pieces to add them to the batting, and then you sew the sides together and you have the lining on the bottom because it's Quilt-as-you-go, and then you just sew up the inside seams and finish them off. So I decided I would, since I had that llama fabric and I had that cute Fico tote, that I would make a couple bags that went with it, these cosmetic bags. So the kit has both of these sizes of bags and the batting, with the batting for those. It also includes these zippers, and these zippers are done a little bit differently in that they have a flap. The zipper's already installed on this fabric, this gray fabric, and then you slide your bag underneath it and then stitch it down. So you're not exactly installing a zipper per se. The zipper's already into this flange, and then you just add that to the bag to do that. These are lined because you quilt as you go, so you're quilting the bags, the top to the lining as you go, but it leaves the raw seams. So I was able to just finish them off with some pretty colorful threads with my serger on the inside. These, again, because everything's laid out and you just put your fabric down and stitch it, fold it, put your fabric down and stitch it, you certainly get these things done in half a day, both of these bags. So these are the zippered cosmetic bags from Quilt-as-you-go and June Taylor. I think when I do Sew Fun, and I told Mallory this, I think one of my least favorite things to do is probably make garments. And I really don't know why that is, because I used to make garments all the time. I made all my maternity clothes, when I made formal dresses, when my husband was in the Navy, and a lot of garments. So in fact, that's mostly what I did. But I gotten away from that and just hadn't quite gotten back into it. But when I made this light sleeve top and tunic from Indigo Junction, I fell in love with it, and it's one of the few things that I've made for Sew Fun that I really, really like and would make again and would probably wear, and we will wear. Again, I got into that deal of wanting to do embroidery on something, and so I made this blouse to look a little bit like a Mexican top. So I put some pretty embroidery on the top. Now the pattern is quite simple. It's a yoke, the bodice front, the back, and then the back yoke and the back of the blouse. So there's basically 3 pattern pieces because the front and back yoke are the same piece. And in the instructions, they just have you put the yoke on, put the gathered bodice underneath it, and then just finish, serge the edge. Well, I always wanted my insides of my garments to look really nicely and finished, and so I certainly have a serger to use. But I also went ahead and lined the yoke, made 2 pieces of the yoke, and then lined it. So you don't see the back of the embroidery. The back of the yoke is solid. See if I can get it off here and show you what I mean. So you'll notice there's no sleeves. The sleeves part of the yoke. And then on the back side, then you have that other piece of yoke, like the lining, and then it's just hand stitched down at the seam between the bodice. And so it's all solid on the back. It gives it a little bit more extra support and weight on the top. The fabric is kind of a gauze fabric. I also added just a little bit of an embroidery accent on the back yoke. So this is the slight top and tunic. I just folded over the sleeve hems and stitched them down and with a nice serged edge, and the same thing for the hem. So this it's another one of these things that went together very quickly, and I really fell in love with this top. We're having a family reunion in July, and I'm certainly planning on wearing it to that because I think it's really cute. So this is a slight sleeve top and tunic from Indigo Junction. So the last couple of projects I mentioned were kind of quick and easy to make. The cosmetic bags, and even the Fico tote really wasn't that long. Didn't take that much to make other than the embroidery, getting the embroidery done. And certainly the little blouse was quick. This ruler wrap is different. So I made this ruler wrap. I was at a quilting retreat back in March with Terry Gonzalez up at Estes Park. And a couple of ladies commented about how they were worried about their rulers getting scratched and stuff as we were moving things around and going from car to the meeting center and everything. So I had this pattern by Annie. It's called the ruler wrap. And and it's big, but it's made so that you can put in a cutting mat as well as 6-inch, 8-inch rulers that are 24 inches long. So the inside are mesh pockets that I'll show you in a moment. So there's a zipper pocket on the outside here that had embroidery too. And then these straps seal it up to make it look a little bit like a briefcase back here. And so the hardware that you need for this bag are some slip rings and some buckles and then some swivel hooks. And then on the inside, on the inside are all the mesh pockets. You see I got a ruler in there, and this is actually, at the very top here, is actually a rod pocket. So you can put a dowel or a curtain rod in here and then hang it on the back of a door. You'd have to hang it with hooks on either side. There's no opening up here for like a hanger part, but you can hang it. So there's 6 mesh pockets on the inside, and then there's also at the very bottom the place for your mat. There's actually a mesh pocket behind it, and then there's this pocket here that you can just set your mat in with a little strap to kind of hold it from flopping out. You can also put rulers vertically in here if you wanted to. So this is quilted, this is a by Annie pattern, and she always provides you with these little tags to keep all your pieces straight, but she also always quilts her projects before she cuts them out, before she cuts the pieces out. This particular bag, since it is so big, it's 68 inches long and 27 inches wide. And she recommends that you try to quilt the fabric to the lining with a soft and stable in between before you cut out the pieces. And the best way to quilt something this big is probably on a long arm, which is what I used. I found this really nice quilting design that looks like, it's probably easier to see on the black side. It's a pin cushion, rulers, and a cutter. So it's really perfect for this bag with the zipper fabric for the front and the back, and then this ruler fabric for the lining. So this is the ruler wrap, and it's not difficult to make except that it's unwieldy. It's difficult in the sense that you need to have a lot of room when you try to sew everything together. You mark on the lining where the pockets go. You bind each pocket on either side of the zipper and on the bottom, and then you just sew them down. So they're not set into any seams or anything except at the sides. And then you have this little piece that goes after you got all that done to kind of cover the very edges, and it's bound. And then you add the piece for the dowel rod, and you add the bottom pocket at the end. And it's very easy, like I said, so it's not difficult to make. It's pretty much just sewing straight lines, but you need to make sure you have a lot of room. I had to clear off a table next to my sewing machine, so I had room for that thing to sit out to the side as I tried to sew it, and make sure there's room for the project to go all the way back to get once your needle gets to the very front of the project. Otherwise it bunches up, and it's got soft and stable in there, and it's kind of hard to get it to lay flat unless you just really make yourself have plenty of room. But it's not difficult, you just need to be roomy. So this is the ruler wrap from By Annie, and we have those for you, and I hope you'll enjoy making that. There is a smaller size available that is quite a bit smaller. You can see it folded up. You can see it folded up right here, which would just hold your rulers and no mat. It would hold up a 6-inch ruler, I think, or maybe an 8. But having made one, I didn't want to make a second one, the smaller one, so I just made the bigger one for you. So I mentioned that I had gone on a quilting retreat with Terry in March, and then I made that. And then I was doing the June book of the month club from Carol Dean Jones, and this one's called Moon Over the Mountain. And it was about going to a quilting retreat in the Appalachian Mountains. And so Moon Over the Mountain was the story, and this was the small quilt project that was associated with the book, because you know these books, each one of them has a quilting project associated with it. And I felt very fortunate because this was the last thing I did getting ready for Sew Fun, and after all this other stuff, I really didn't want a complicated quilt. So what I made was this, and I decided to make it just, it's supposed to be like a little small wall hanging that's quilted, but I decided that I was just going to put it together and frame it. And I really like how it came out. This is folded fabric blocks. So I first of all put a piece of fusible woven on the background fabric. And then I did the folded fabric for the mountains. And then I just cut out a circle for the moon. And then I fused the moon on and fused the mountains on. And I actually did paper piecing so I could get this mountain right. And then fused it all together and then framed it. So it was very quick and easy to do. I just used a blanket stitch around the mountains and around the moon. And this is Moon Over the Mountain. It's the project in the June book for the 6th in the series of the Quilting Cozy series from Carol Dean Jones. So I thought back a few Sew Funs ago, I had made an apron. It was a reversible apron, and it was a crisscross in the back, and you just slipped your arms into it. And I made it with Christmas fabric on one side and Thanksgiving fabric on the back. And it was by this lady named Mary Mallory. And so she came out with this other pattern called a 90-minute poncho. And you know, 90 minutes sounded pretty good to me, so I decided I would try to make that out of fleece to get ready for the winter. You could also certainly make this out of nylon or some kind of waterproof material if you wanted to, you know, you'd be able to wear it in the summer. If you're going out to Red Rocks for a concert and you need a little poncho, it'd be perfect for that. But I made the one out of fleece, and it folds up, once you get it all made and everything, it folds up in this nice little pillow. So you can use it as a cushion or pillow. But the poncho itself is very simple. It's basically, you have to have the exact amount of fleece that she tells you need, and you fold it so there's two folds. You fold it in half and you fold it in quarters. And so you put the pattern so that it's on both folds, and that's why you need so much. But that means also that there's really basically only one piece of the poncho itself, and then you add the cowl. Or you can also, there's also a pattern piece if you want it to be a hood instead of a cowl. And then there's warmer pockets on the front. You can put your hands in. And then on the back side is that little piece that you need that you stuff everything into to make the pillow. So when you fold it back up and then you roll it up into that little pouch on the back, then you have a nice little pillow out of it, and it's easy to transport. This was very fun and quick to make. It's very cozy. I made it out of some really nice fleece. I went ahead and bought some contrast fleece just because I thought this would look pretty for the cowl neck and for the pocket on the front. Didn't add any embroidery to it. But I think I will use this a lot in the wintertime, even just sitting around the house because we keep our house pretty cold. So I think it's going to come in handy this winter. That's the 90-minute poncho by Mary Mallory. So let's talk now about a couple of books that I used. One of the books is called Easy Layer Cake Quilts by Barbara Groves and Mary Jacobson. And this has, I don't know, I think it's 15 or so quilts in it that you use layer cakes to make. And so there's all kinds, and she's used very, very colorful fabrics in these. I made 2 of them out of this book. The first one I made is this, and I decided that I would make it as a patriotic. I first started out was going to make it similar to this, and then I was going to find some polka dot fabric, and then these are 10-inch squares cut in half with this white and polka dot fabric in between. And then I got to thinking about it, and I realized I had this star fabric that looked like it would be really nice in that as those pieces that go down between the blocks. So this is the quilt that I made with that. It's only 50 by 50, so it's a nice lap quilt. And if you're out, even in Colorado, even though it's hot right now, 4th of July, the evening may be chilly, and you may be wanting to sit outside watching some fireworks, so what a perfect little lap quilt to have. So what I did on this quilt was, first of all, you have your 10-inch squares that you cut in half. And then I made this, I fussy cut these stripes and then added the pieces of white on either side. And I made the pieces of white a little bit wider than they needed to so that I could cut them to the exact size they needed to be to make sure those white borders were always the same size. And the red was very nice because there was actually a little piece of blue next to these red squiggles that was perfect to sew on. So I was able to get those looking straight. I was able to get the white looking straight. And of course I had just cut the triangle, the 10-inch squares on the diagonal and pieced it together. It went together very quickly. You do have to be really sure that these are exactly the same size everywhere, because when you get to places like this, you want to make sure that all those seams line up. Other than that, there's not a whole lot to worry about. I made this at that quilting retreat I was telling you about, and finally got the top finished there, so it only took me a couple days to make the top. And then when I got it home and was ready to quilt it, I thought about how I wanted to quilt it, and I gotta, I guess, confess, I had the robotics for a long arm. And I'm kind of lazy in the sense that I like to find a pattern that'll go from edge to edge. Just, keep rolling it up and do the next row, next row, next row. That's easiest for me. I don't quite have, I don't know if the right imagination is the right word or whatever, but I haven't quite figured out how to make a quilt so that there's some appropriate quilting on this side and some appropriate quilting on this side and something different in the center. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with just trying to get so fun projects done. So sometime when I have a little bit more time, I want to play with a little bit more of that. So right now, most of my quilting just goes straight across, and I'm not as pleased as the quilting on this as probably I would have been if I had done it a little bit differently. But it's some cute little fireworks done in red, white, and blue thread, and it completes this quilt for the 4th of July. So we have 4th of July covered. Now let's talk about Halloween. So if we can have Christmas in July, I think we can have Halloween in June, right? And I love Halloween, and I like to make projects with our Halloween. And you may have noticed if you watch my Sew Funds, I like theme quilts. I like things that I don't make just kind of general piece stuff, except a couple exceptions in the back. But generally, I like something that's for Christmas or Halloween or some holiday. So I made a couple Halloween projects, and one of them I'm going to talk about now. The other one I'm going to show you in a little bit when we get to the quilts in the back. But this is the Spectacular Halloween Quilting. And it's got projects for every room. There's pillows in here, table runners, table pads, and I really fell in love with the quilt on the front, which is what I'm going to talk about later. But I also found this table runner in there that has these Halloween stars that are made from a, well, I'll completely blank on the name. The 2.5-inch strip roll, jelly roll, and it's made from a jelly roll. So you sew the 3 strips together and then cut the triangles from that to create the table runner. I have a big table, and so get these off here. So I made this very long. In the book, it's only 3 stars, and mine is 5. So this thing's 100 inches long. I'm not going to stretch it all the way out, but you get the idea. So again, these are the triangles with the 3 strips, and then you just put them together in a certain order so that there's no Y seams. You're not sewing any Y seams or anything crazy like that. And then you put them together with these black diamonds in between, which are just basically 2 triangles upside down from one another. And then I quilted it with some spider web and spiders quilting. And this black fabric that I have just wanted to collect lint, so it's kind of linty looking in the black. But and in the back fabric, I found this tarot card pattern from fabric from Joann, so that was pretty cute. So put that on the back. I like the colors in it, kind of match the colors of the stars. So this is one of the table runners that is in this spectacular Halloween book. And I'll show you the quilt shortly. The other Halloween project that I did was Spellbound, which is from the Quilt Factory. And in it we used Midnight Magic 2 charm pack. And so we have those available. And this is a really cute quilt because it has, you know, the piecework in the center, these very large appliques on the corners, and the fabrics on this are just gorgeous. And so this is like I said, Moda's Midnight Magic 2, and then the appliques I cut out, and I simply did the I didn't have enough room to hang all these quilts in the back, so the appliques I just cut out with my scan and cut, and then just did a blanket stitch around them, and then put them on the blocks and put this quilt together. Lots of triangles. And one of the tools that we brought in to help with sewing some of these quilts, piecing some of these quilts together to have a lot of triangles involved, is called the Sew Straight ruler. And it is a plastic template that you glue to the bottom of your machine. And then you line up one corner of your triangle. When you're sewing two squares together to make 2 half-square triangles, you line up one corner with a needle and the other corner on this center line if you're going straight down the middle. If you're doing an offset and doing 1/4 inch on either side of the center, you're going to want to line the corner up with this line over here, and then be at a 1/4 inch from the other end for the other corner where the needle is. And I don't have the actual template to show you because it's glued down to my machine, but this is how it works. And I'm writing a blog about how to do this, so stay tuned for that, and we'll get you some blog information on that. But this was invaluable in all these quilts that I made that have any kind of triangle associated with them, because it means you don't have to mark, you don't have to draw a line from corner to corner on your triangles, on your squares. As long as you keep that one point there as you sew, you're going to have a straight line down the center of that square, or offset 1/4 inch if that's the way you're doing it. So it works out really well, and you'll see when I talk about some of these quilts in the back, I couldn't have lived without this Sew Straight ruler. Well, I could have, but I would have been spending an awful lot of time marking things as opposed to just being able to sit down and sew. So that was very important and very helpful in making this quilt. So I still have one more Halloween thing to show you that I'll show you shortly, but let's talk about Christmas. So it's not July, it's not Christmas in July, it's Christmas in June, but I did have a couple, and actually the first project I want to talk to you about is this pillow that's in front here. It's called Peppermint Santa Table Runner and Wall Hanging. And I have to give credit to my sister, Pat, who made this for me for Christmas. So I can't take any credit for making it, only for showing it. But it's just so cute, and it's by Desiree Designs, who has some really, really nice embroidery designs. Something a little bit different than some of the stuff we're kind of used to with OESD. OESD is beautiful, but it's nice to have something in the mix too. So this is the Peppermint Santa. So she's got it set up as a little pillow, and it's a little not stuffed quite as heavy because she had to fold it and mail it to me. So it's got 3 Santas and then these cute little peppermints in between. And then the quilting is included on the discs, and it's these little peppermint candies. So this is just so cute. Another bench pillow. I'm going to have to decide, because my bench that I have for my bench pillow sits outside. Probably won't want it outside in the winter, so I may have to figure out a way to bring it in the house, put this pillow on it. But this is the Peppermint Santa Table Runner and Wall Hanging from Desiree Designs. I also made a table runner from this pattern. It's called Mr. Frosty, and it's from Anka's Treasures, and it uses a Moda collection in the fabric, for the fabrics. And this is all piecework. And again, we got lots of little triangles going on, both here and here. But it went together really very quickly. I quilted this, and then of course you're using charm pack to make the border. I quilted this with some snowflakes from a design that was an Urban Elements embroidery design for sewing machines, for embroidery machines. So I didn't use the long arm for this. I actually used the magnetic hoop that we have now for I have it for my tin needle. They have them for the luminaire as well. They're so nice because it's a full-sized hoop. It can hold something that's like 7 5/8 by 14. And you just use magnets to hold it all down into the hoop, and then just, do whatever you want to do for the embroidery. I did the snowflakes in the center, and then around the edges I did some little snowmen. That was actually a border from when I needed good design, free motion Christmas. So it came out really cute. It was really quick to do. And the only thing about when you use your embroidery machine to quilt, you have to remember that an embroidery machine is set up so that the top thread shows through to the bottom. You don't ever want your bobbin thread showing up, and as a general rule, you're not going to see the back of an embroidery design. It's going to be behind a pocket, or on a shirt, or behind a bag, or whatever. You're not going to see the back. And if you do, you don't care. But when you quilt, you do see the back. And so a couple of things that I learned in trying to quilt with my embroidery machine is, number one is to tighten up the tension so that the top thread is tighter and will bring that bobbin thread up more. And also I advance over and just do one stitch and then pull the bobbin thread up, so I don't have those knots on the bottom when it does the quilting. Now I have not figured out how to catch it before it does the last stitch, because it's going to tie off, and I get that little bit of a tie off at the end on the back, but I don't have the big knot that you get with all the top thread that gets bunched up under there if you bring that bobbin thread up at the beginning. And that helps a lot. So if you are quilting with your embroidery machine, kind of keep those considerations in place. If you have an embroidery machine, like a Brother with a camera, or the new FOF Creative Icon 2 that has the cameras, or even the Berninas and the older FOFs that have the perfect placement tools available in the machine, it makes it pretty easy to quilt this and then to be able to start the next row and know exactly where to put it without it overlapping but not having too big of a gap. That's the biggest trick to quilting with the machine. But it came out really cute, and this is Mr. Frosty. It's small enough to be able to use on like a sideboard or a small table, and I'm going to put it on my bar, I think. So speaking of sewing a lot of little things, it's called the Jingle Bell Greeter. It's by Happy Hollow Designs. And you'll notice this is a whole bunch of little bitty squares. The squares were cut 1 3/8 inch, and then with a 1/4 inch seam, it's just going to be just right about an inch square. And then there's a few half square triangles involved as well. So the trick to this is this technique that they have of using a gridded fusible interfacing. That's marked off in 1 inch grids with 1/2 inch in betweens. So you cut the squares just a little bit smaller. This is supposed to be 1.5 inch squares, but you're going to cut them 1 3/8. So just a little bit smaller than 1.5 inch. And you center it on this, and there's a pattern that shows you exactly, I don't have it with me. There's a pattern that shows you exactly how to lay out the squares. How many reds, how many rows of red you go, when do you put in the whites with the gold trim, when do you put in the pinks for the face. And you follow that pattern, and you put in your squares, and there's a little bit of gap between each square because they're not quite 1.5 inches. And then you sew all of the horizontal pieces together, and you clip some seams, and then you sew all the vertical pieces together. And what happens then is all of the seams line up really, really well because of the way it's made. Because the fabric is a little bit bigger than where the seam line is, and because you're folding it, all the squares line up. And so it's a very quick and easy way to put together a whole bunch of little squares. There's 338 red squares in this thing. That doesn't count the black or the white. Now, the pattern called for, she showed how to, she didn't tell, the pattern didn't tell you exactly how to make the half square triangles. And in some instances, they use different fabrics, because this is kind of a different types of red batik. This is all batik fabric, different types of reds, different types of blacks. But when it came to those ones that needed the half square triangles, I did not want to make those individually. So I wrote a blog quite a while ago about how to make 8 half square triangles at once by sewing together 2 squares of fabric. And basically, kind of the rule of thumb is you take the finished size of the square that you want, add 7/8 of an inch, multiply that by 2, and that's the size of square you need. So you take a square of the pink, a square of the white, and a square of the gold that are the right size, and then you sew on each. You sew a 1/4 inch off each diagonal. So so on one diagonal you're sewing a 1/4 inch on each side, and on the other diagonal you're sewing it. And then you cut on the horizontal, the vertical, and the diagonals, and you end up with 8 half square triangles. Now I always add a little bit and then cut the squares down to size after I've made them, rather than trying to have exactly the right size of half square triangles. But it's a really quick way to make 8 half square triangles at once, and they're all accurate and they're all the right size. If you make them a little bigger, then cut them down, and it's just so much faster than trying to do a piecing of those individual little triangles. So I did that for those. So that's why the gold and the white and the black and the black with the gold spots on the belt are the same fabrics instead of being different fabrics. But the boots are different fabrics, different blacks, and the reds are different. The main Santa is different pieces of red batik to give it some, kind of a patchwork look. The bells, little bells around the top are sewn on, but I was nervous about that, so I also, once I got them sewn on, I hit them with a little bit of glue just to make sure those stitches hold. The buttons for the eyes were sewn on before. When you make this thing, it's flat, and then you're going to sew it into a tube. So before I sewed it into the tube, I put the buttons on. And then once I got it to the tube, it's just like a mailing tube. And then once you've sewn that thing to make it a circle, you just slide that on there like that. And I did find that this tube was longer. It actually made the hat stand up to about right there. And I thought that was too long, based on the picture even, so I had my husband cut the tube off a little bit, so it's a little bit shorter than what came. So the kit we had brought in has the tube, it has the beard, it has the eyeglasses, the buttons, and the bells. It also has a round ball for the nose. And what bothered me about the round ball for the nose was trying to get a single point of contact on a round wooden ball to glue into, because you couldn't sew it because there's no holes to sew it, to get it to stay. So I went to Hobby Lobby and found some round balls that have a 1/4 of it cut off, so there's one big flat edge on the back, and use that to glue it instead of trying to glue a round ball. I think that worked a lot better. I used a little blush to blush up his nose and his cheeks, and like I said, I hit the bells with a little bit of glue, the buttons glued on for his belt, and I sewed the bell on the top. So this is the Jingle Bell greeter. I made this little stand for him. One of the things, when you make the bottom, when you make the black, you turn under this a 1/4 inch, so you have basically a finished edge on it. But then I made the mistake when I quilted it, my batting went all the way down to the edge instead of stopping a 1/4 inch short. And so when I trimmed it, I ended up trimming up a little bit of my finished edge. So I made this little stand for him just so he can sit in there and not the very bottom not show. But he's really stable. You do get a bag of sand, put sand in a baggie and put it in the tube, and gives it some weight so it doesn't fall over easily. So that is the Jingle Bell Santa. And Happy Hollow is the company that has the pattern, and they have a whole bunch of designs that are a lot of wall hangings that use this grid. And one thing I really liked about the grid too was it was very easy to adhere the squares to. In other words, it didn't take, sitting there with an iron forever to get it to adhere. Just barely touch it, and then enough of that adhesive melted that the squares stayed in place. Of course, you need to cover them as you go, the stuff that you haven't gotten squares on yet, so that you don't make your iron sticky. I just use a Teflon sheet on top of everything. So I've mentioned this Easy Layer Cake Quilts book when I showed you the Patriotic little quilt that I had done in this pattern. But I also made this quilt out of that book. I think I made this for my granddaughter. It's just so pretty with all the bright colors. I used the primary colors in it, and it is called Flower Power. And so these are made by taking the 10-inch squares and slicing them into these parts. So you have these strips, and then there's a certain order in which you sew them together with these little yellow centers. So it was a little, it was easy quilt to make. It just took a little bit of time because it's a lot of sewing. Because you have to sew these pieces, and you have to sew them to the half square triangles, and then you try to get it all together. So it just takes a little bit of time to do, to get them all, and then to get them all lined up. One of the things that was helpful to me in making this was to make sure when you're squaring up your squares and everything is to use a ruler that has a 45-degree mark, so you can make sure that these angles are correct when you cut them. When you cut the thing, so that they line up to the corners. They're not all perfect, but they all came out pretty close by making sure I had that ruler set so that this was along the 45 degree, and it was the right angle down here. So this is called Flower Power, and I love pre-cuts. And so when I was thinking about this quilt and pre-cuts in general, I brought in this little book called Quilting with Pre-cuts, which is just a little handy pocket guide that has all types of different stars that you can use with different sizes of pre-cuts, whether they're 10-inch squares or fat quarters or charm packs, and you can put in together some different blocks that you might want to put in a quilt. So this is just sort of a little reference guide. It gives you the yardages that you need for what you want to make, and how much you would need if you had a fat quarter, how many squares would you get out of it, or if you had a charm pack or a layer cake. So this is Quilting with Pre-cuts, just as a little guide to help you if you wanted to do even more. And again, this is just layer cakes. This is just 10-inch squares. So this gives you a little bit more information on those. When I quilted this, I just used a cute little daisy with some hearts in it. And then the back fabric is the same as what was in one of the flowers up there. So this is Flower Power, and it's in the book Easy Layer Cake Quilts. So the other book, I showed you the table runner with the Halloween stars. And this is a quilt out of that book. Like I mentioned earlier, I fell in love with this quilt on the cover. I gotta make that. So I was able to find the border fabric. It's a Michael Miller fabric. You might be able to get it online. And then the spider webs in the corners and the cats are paper pieced. So they have the paper piece instructions in there. And then we have a whole lot of flying geese. And there is a flying geese ruler that we're bringing in. It's called Easy Flying Geese. It's a Creative Grids ruler, and it shows you how to make 4 flying geese at once. And so I use that to make the flying geese. I found this, so these cats aren't exactly they're the more feline looking cats, right? Especially the ones up there. And so I found this fabric from Joann's that had the same kind of cat. And I thought, well, that's perfect for that quilt. And it was the darndest fabric to use. So when you think about things that have straight lines or things in a row, take a look at the selvages and see how straight across they go. Because these cats, man, they were crooked cats. Because if you went across a selvage, cats went like that. And I kind of wanted them to be straight on the back of the quilt, which was very difficult to do. So I didn't quite achieve that. I got it a little bit better by cutting it so, but it really wasn't very easy to do. And the fabric itself, it's one of Joann's. It's probably, some of their earlier fabrics that probably weren't the best as far as weight goes and how it felt. It just was so perfect for the cats. And I ordered it online, so I really didn't have a chance to feel the fabric to know. Maybe wouldn't have got it, but it came out okay, and it's cute. Just the cats aren't very straight. And then the quilting, I found the perfect quilting pattern for the cats. It looked like these cats up here, pretty much. So this is the Stray Cat Strut, and it's in this spectacular Halloween quilting book. In addition to, I have one fall pattern in here, but there's also some cute little wall hangings that are paper pieced, some round table mats, a square table mat. So there's a little wall hanging, a little haunted house. So there's a lot of really cute projects in here for Halloween. So this last quilt I have to show you is called Farm Girl Vintage 2 by Lori Holt. And this is a massive quilt, and it took me, quite frankly, probably a couple months to make, working just about every day, all day. There's 50 blocks in this quilt. Some are 6-inch, some are 12. And all of them are pieced, except for a little bit of embroidery for some accents, like the pig's tail. And almost every one of them has multitudes of little triangles that are sewn on the edges of a rectangle of fabric to give it some dimension of curve, some sense of curve to the pattern. So, you know, you have a strip here. You start off with a block of this blue, then you sew a quarter triangle on it there, and a corner on this way, fold them over and cut them, and you end up with something that looks like that. So this took, obviously, quite a while, and there's some very small pieces in here. These small triangles in this basket quilt, these ones and this one. So again, you know, there's a lot of little triangles to make. That Sew Straight thing that I showed you earlier was invaluable on some of the bigger ones. And it's not very helpful when you're doing really little ones, because your markings on your needle plate are probably good enough for that. But if you go extend past your needle plate, you need something to help you keep you straight. Otherwise, you're marking everything, and it takes forever. So I found that very helpful. The book is called Farm Girl Vintage 2, and of course, this is I tried to duplicate what was on the cover as close as I could. I didn't have all of the same fabrics. But so the sheet has really good instructions for every block, what fabric you need to cut, and then set by set piece of how you put together the block, for example, of this cow. Very good, very easy, but again, you'll notice you have all these little triangles that are on top of a block of fabric in order to make it have some dimension, some curve to it, some points of ears. So once you get through all the blocks, there's 45 of them, but it takes 50 to make the quilt. So you can duplicate 5 blocks if you want, and that's what she recommends doing, or maybe use one of her other patterns or something. But I had this Quilt Builder's card deck that's over there, and it has 40 blocks with instructions on how to make them. So you get a color version on one side, and on the back shows you the exact way to make the block. And so I picked out 5 blocks from this set and used them in here. I believe this was one of these down here was one. But anyway, there's 5 of them in here that are not in the book. And this little card set is really nice, because not only does it have all these 40 blocks, but it also gives you some ways to put blocks together. It shows you, it has cards that will give you material requirements for different quilts and what you want to do with it. So, and they're all kind of color coded. Like the block cards are one color, the layout cards are have a blue border, and so they're very, very well organized. And so I used this again to create 5 of the blocks for this quilt. The quilt itself is, once you get the blocks made, you put together basically 12-inch blocks. So, and you have to sew. You have 12-inch and you have 6-inch blocks. So you may have 2 6s together, and you may have a 12, and then you sew them in certain combinations to make it all fit just right. So sometimes you have 2 6s, and this was a 12-inch block on top and bottom. This is a 12, so they're staggered a little bit so that you can get them all the rows to line up. I quilted this with a chicken wire quilt pattern that I found online, And I thought it came out really cute with the little chicks on the back, but the chicken wire just added to it. It's a lot of quilting because there's a lot of little chicken wires squares in it. It's a big quilt, so it took a little while to quilt it. But it came out really nice, and this is Farm Girl Vintage 2. My intent is to gift my son, who has a little farm up in Berthoud, his wife for Christmas. I hope they'll like it, because if they don't, I'm taking it back. But that's Farm Girl Vintage 2. That's all I have for you today. I really appreciate your joining us online for June 2022 So Fun. If you get a chance and you can go by the store, you can see some of the samples there at our trunk shows. The schedule will be online for when they'll be at the different stores. And until then, we hope to see you in the store as often as possible, and have a great summer.